Hey guys, how's it going? Coach Weston here with Good Lift Performance. Been a while since I made a video. Definitely fell off the YouTube train there for a minute. Just got real busy with coaching and taking care of the little one. For those of you who don't know, I am also, besides a full-time coach, a stay-at-home dad for my almost 2-year-old. Now, he's actually turning 2 this month, so that's very, very exciting. But yeah, so I'm back making YouTube videos. I want to get back trying to make a weekly YouTube video because I definitely want to get back out there making content. And then, so I was, very busy for a while, and then right as things started to clear up, I got sick, which was just like the basic flu, nothing crazy, right? But from when I had COVID a couple of years ago, I now have what the doctors diagnosed as COVID-induced asthma. So basically, anytime my lungs get inflamed, I just go on this like nonstop coughing frenzy, and it won't stop. It takes forever to get under control. So I do have an inhaler to help kind of get that under control, but it's funny because the coughing is like the thing that really lasted. Like I was only sick for a couple of days, but the cough has lasted at least a month, if not more. And it's like sort of got a little better, but ultimately it's just not gone away. I have a long-term acting one that I can use to try. It's supposed to get it down, and then I have one that is more short-term. I keep looking off to the side at them. I have one that's more powerful, but it's a shorter burst. It's just meant to suppress it for a little bit. So hopefully I don't cough too much during this video as I go and cough. So I'm gonna try to get through this video as much as I can without coughing. But yeah, let's get into today's topic. So today's topic is gonna be about training through periods of high stress. Particularly a lot of my athletes went through that this summer. And so we had to make a lot of adjustments about how we train through periods of high stress. So I figured this would be a great topic to kickstart the YouTube channel again and go over how you guys can adapt your training for when you're going through a period of really high stress. And so when I mean like a period of really high stress is a period of time where, right, something happened to where we have way higher stress levels than normal. So one, why does that matter? When stress is abnormally high, especially for a long period of time, that can, even if it's just high for a short period of time, that can kill your gains a little bit in terms of if you ever gotten into a really big argument, right? Or let's say you had something bad happen at work or anything where you just were really stressed out, right? And then try to train after that training session usually doesn't go as well. Maybe some people are really good at blocking that stuff out, but for a lot of people that can really negatively affect you, especially if it's something that just kind of sticks with you and you keep thinking about it. And so normally if it's just a quick burst of one situation that's really stressful, we don't really tend to notice that because it's usually, maybe you just had one bad session, then you're fine the next session, right? It doesn't really overall affect you. But when you are going through an extended period of high stress, that can really start to affect your gains and affect your ability to perform, your motivation to train, your energy levels, right? All that stuff. And there's lots of different things that can manifest as. So for example, a lot of my student lifters had internships this summer, which were way busier and more stressful than their actual semester schedule, funny enough. So we had to end up having to make a lot of adjustments during that time so that they could still train and still try to make progress while they were really, really busy and stressed out during the summer. Other situations I've had is maybe a family member has passed away, and so now they need to make we need to make adjustments because they're having to coordinate the funeral, or it took a really big toll on them and they're just not mentally ready to get back into training, so on and so forth. Or maybe someone's on a really big project and they are working overtime and way more hours than normal. And so, all right, it's a project that's not just going to last a couple of days or even just a week. It's going to last a long period of time, a couple weeks. And so we want to adjust training to adapt to that. So basically anything that's more than a week long period, right? Because that way it's something that's, hey, we know it's going to be like this for a while, so we need to adapt the training around this. It's not, we don't want to just white knuckle our way through it, because like with powerlifting, it's hard. Like stress is really going to affect your top end, your ability to perform, your ability to hit like your heavy stuff. A lot of times I see when athletes are really stressed out, and I've gone through this as well, the top end is the thing that gets affected the most. The back down sets, the working sets, the submaximal stuff really doesn't get affected. And so like, let's say if you were a bodybuilder, right, or someone like that, where normally like exercise is supposed to be good for stress management. Well, if you just go into the gym and you're like, oh, I'm just going to go on some machines and go ham, you probably won't even notice the fact that stress is like reducing your ability to perform, because at that point you're just more going for the feel of it, or you're going for just to put in a lot of effort, and it doesn't necessarily matter how much weight you're using, right? You're just trying to be active, move, and work hard. But with like a sport like powerlifting, where we measure our success not by the amount of effort we put in, but by how well we can move X amount of weight, or ability to add weight to the bar, that can really start to affect us, because stress will absolutely tank that. So that's why it's really important to adapt training when we have these longer periods of high stress, because we don't want to just white knuckle our way through it. That will, or I should say, that can lead to a faster rate of burnout, because you're trying to force training when it's not there. And when you have so much other stuff going on, it can almost like put a negative feeling towards training, because you're trying to force it while all this other stuff is going on in your life. It could also increase our risk of injury, because we're trying to lift weights we probably shouldn't be lifting at that time. And our ability to recover is ultimately down, right? Because another big reason why we want to change this is because our body doesn't know how to differentiate between productive and unproductive stress. Basically, we just have this, and this, a metaphor, but we have a stress cup of how much stress that we can handle, and it gets filled up throughout the day, whether that's life stress, training stress, what have you. It's productive, unproductive stress, doesn't matter. We can handle, X amount of stress, assuming things are going well. We don't have a ton, like we might have a little bit of stress, right? These are our normal daily stressors, which is good for us. It's not filling up that cup. So we can start to fill that cup up with training, not to the point where it's overflowing, but fill it up to a healthy amount where we can get productive training in and make progress. Well, when our life stressor is much higher, then we try to add training on top of that. That's what makes the cup overflow. We can't handle the amount of stress we're trying to put our body through, both physically, mentally, productive and unproductive. And so something has to give. And normally, training is the one we can adapt, because the life stress is normally something we can't adapt. So we need to adapt the training around the life stress. So those are the main reasons why we would want to adapt training during periods of high stress, because otherwise it is going to negatively affect our training, and we want to adapt around it so that we can still continue to train, build momentum, and potentially even make progress, maybe not as much progress as we were making, but still continue to move forward and push the needle in the direction we want to be going. So I'm going to show you some examples of how I help my athletes during those times, what that kind of looks like, and some of my go-to strategies for adapting the training during high periods of stress. All right, so here we have one of my athletes training. This is Brooklyn. Shout out to Brooklyn. I got her permission prior to making this video if I could use her, her training log to go over what we did in terms of helping her manage her training during her period of high stress. So she is a collegiate lifter who had a very busy summer internship and was not able to train to her full capacity during the summer because her internship was very, very busy, very, very demanding, both physically and mentally. And so we decided to pull back her training a little bit, even though she was in meet prep. So this is right around week 9 or 10. So she is competing on November 4th, which is right here. So currently we are on this basically the start of her peaking block. You'll see we kind of had to make some adjustments around here, but basically we are starting her last peaking block going into competition. And you'll see right around here, this is right before her training, or she started her internship, and then it took a little bit of a dive at the end here. And so we realized, all right, let's do basically a maintenance block to get her through the summer internship, which was through August. And then going into September, we started ramping back up. There was a little bit more, still a little bit about like getting back on track. This is more of like a getting her back on track type of training where we kind of had to adjust to make sure we were going to peak right, hit it on time, and then basically still get everything ready to go. So our goal was to, from here to here, was to keep her training, keep her building momentum, so that when the summer internship was done, she would be able to hit the ground running and start training to her more of her full capacity, or start raising her training back up to working at full capacity again. And so that's one of the big things about when we're adapting the training for high stress. Ultimately, we want to have a target range of when the high stress would be over, right? When the internship is done or when the work project is done. Obviously, if we're dealing with something more on the emotional or relationship side, that's not going to be as predictable, right? But that just takes more nuance and for that specific situation. But in almost every other situation, we should have a more direct start and end date. So we can kind of judge, all right, how long do we need to be running this maintenance or reduced training period? And when can we start to ramp back up? So looking around here, this was the end of her second block. So you'll see that here, training was going well. This week, we were hitting our target loads, right? She went for a double on deadlift, 225. Was supposed to be, or we had predicted to be an 8 RPE. It was only a 7 RPE, which was fantastic. And then, so basically training was going really well. She was hitting all of her numbers, right? Like she hit the top on squat here, hit the top end of 205, which was supposed to be an 8, at a little bit of undershoot. So she was really on fire that week. She had mentioned during this week, she's like, hey, my internship started up. It's going to be pretty tough, but let me see if we can continue to train as normal. And so, especially at this point in the block where we only had one more week left, I didn't just initially go, okay, like, let's just pull everything back, because every training had been going really, really well. I didn't want to pull the plug quite yet. So I'm like, hey, I know we think that the internship is going to be really tough, but let's actually try it out and see how we can do. So even though I just said don't white knuckle your way through it, I was like, well, let's try white knuckling our way through this week, just because we had such a good momentum. I wanted to see if we could still push through and get some nice PRs and end the block off really solid, and to see how, because there's also times where lifters will tell me like, hey, I'm about to do XYZ, it's going to be really stressful. How should we adapt training? And I go, well, let's see how it actually affects you, because sometimes, and once again, I do this myself too, sometimes we think that things are going to affect us way more than they do. And then you end up adjusting training when you might not actually need to. So it's better to, in certain situations, to just try it, see how it goes. And then if it truly does end up plummeting, then you can make that adjustment, right? So going into week 10, this was her first or second week of the internship, and strength absolutely plummeted. I think she actually did miss that session. Comes in and gets bodied by this. Went for a double at 9. Went to 245. I remember she said this went okay, but everything else was just so, like, she was so dead and tired. She could barely move. Same thing with here. Like, she ended up actually hitting her top set pretty well. So her top sets went pretty well. It was mostly her down sets got, like here, only got one set in, burned out from top set. And then over here, this actually went pretty decently well. Back was sore from pushing too hard Tuesday. So basically, she got in her top set, and that's about as much energy as she had for the day, and was tanked by the down sets and couldn't finish everything out. So, and she had told me during her check-in at this point that, hey, like, training just did not go well this week. I barely made it to the gym. It was really, really, really hard. And so we go, okay, yes, it ended up being pretty difficult. Let's adjust down, make an adjustment for the next block, because we know, all right, it's not going to be any different. If anything, it's only going to ramp up. So we need to make some adjustments moving forward. So what I had her do was, and it's a little bit easier to see on the next tab here in terms of her training. we moved her to a 3-day split. So one of the things we could do during a period of high stress, usually we're going to have less time on our hands. We're going to have less time to be in the gym, whether that's either days per week or literally just the amount of time we have in the day to be at the gym. So I cut her back to 3 days a week. So that way we were still squatting twice a week, benching 3 times a week, and then deadlifting just once a week. Normally she deadlifts twice a week, but we cut it down to just once a week because deadlift's definitely going to be the one most affected by stress. So we pulled it back to 3 days a week just so she had to be in the gym less. She could spend more time at home sleeping. So down from 4 days to 3 days. And then we also cut back on her accessories. We made all of these optional, and only made them 2 sets. So it was basically, hey, whatever you have the energy to do, throw these in. If not, no worries. I wasn't super concerned about that. I was mostly concerned about her doing her main work. And then in terms of the intensity at which we trained, what we did, and what I do with a lot of athletes who go through this type of scenario, is the end of the block was week 15. And we knew that, looking at the calendar, week 15 was towards the end of her internship. So she'd be finishing here, deloading, and then moving back to Boulder somewhere around in this week. And so we knew she was going to get back to normal life around this time. And so that's how, we timed up her block. It kind of incidentally worked out to be a perfect block length. If it was longer, we'd have made it longer, but ultimately ended up being just another 4 weeks that we needed to adjust, which timed out nicely for us. But what I did was I put her last week of the block here. If you look at the numbers that we used, they look more like week 1 numbers of what she would normally do. So 3 sets of 8 at 64% is more in line to what she would do as like a week 1 position. So if we backtrack to here, her first week of this block was 3 sets of 8 at 67%. So here we ended the block even just a little bit lighter than that, 3 sets of 8 at 64%. And so all of these numbers were based off of where I would typically actually start her relatively. Some of these top sets are more just an RPE down. So instead of pushing to a 9, on bench, instead of pushing to RP 9 on bench, we're pushing to an RP 8. And then on squat and deadlift, we're just pushing to an RPE 7 instead of an 8. So something kind of hard, but not super hard. And so basically my thought process here is, all right, I know we're going to be able to start to transition into a regular training after the end of this block. So let me put the end of her block relatively where we would start a normal block and then work backwards from there. So that way we can start off incredibly light, work our way up, and then as we get to the end of the block, the stress starts to dive down, and now we're hitting training numbers that are relatively where she would start a block. So then as we transition back to normal life, we can take that momentum and start transitioning into a normal block for her, and she's now at the training numbers that she would use in that period anyway, and we can continue that momentum that we had during the period of high stress. So we're not just, kicking it back, taking it easy, and not moving them forward. We still always want to push the needle forward. We want to be moving in the right direction. So even if it's still really, really light training, as long as it's training, it's deliberate, and it's specific to what we're trying to do, and it's moving us in the right direction, we're actually able to progress that, we can still make some progress. You can definitely make some progress doing some very sub-maximal training for a short period of time, just like it's kind of like a minimum effective dose, right? Where I think the studies are that you can do about 6 to 8 weeks of a minimum effective dose protocol and still make the same amount of progress you were prior, but then that minimum effective dose will start to wear off and you'll need to start adding in back in more, right? It's more the novelty of it. Well, same thing with this. We can use some very maximal, almost minimum effective dose in terms of the intensity, and still make some progress while allowing her not to be overly stressed out from her training. And this block ended up working very, very well for us. So if you to kind of come over here, Oh, no, it's going to be on this here, week 12. So we started off 3 sets of 8 at 65%. So basically what I did, and some of these numbers, so 65%, 140, this was based off of a 215 max, but she had hit that or more for a double. So I bumped up her training max. That's why the numbers look a little bit different. But basically, if you look here, so it's actually more like, it probably been more like 58%. So like 140 pounds, right? 145, 150, 155. And we ended at 65%, and we started off, this was more like 58%, right? If I come over here, if I had to guess, yeah, 58%. Basically, we started off the block at 58% and then worked our way up. And if you can see, like, especially that first week, 58% was still a 6.5. And then it dropped back down to a 5, built up to a 6, and then right around more of a 6.5. So we were still in that 6 RPE range where we'd want to start off a block. This is probably even a little bit high for, like, the RPE was still high because we still were during that period of high stress. So you can still see it's affecting her a little bit, but not nearly as much as if we were actually trying to push the push the weight as normal, right? So those are the 2 biggest things that I'm going to do when I have an athlete that is going through a period of high stress. We're generally going to pull back the days per week so they don't have to go to the gym as much, because you got to think about, okay, there's also the commute to the gym, just the commute back home to the gym. There's the psychological strain of having to still warm up and get in the zone, right? And there's also the thought of, if you're trying to force training during that time, you can start to negatively associate training with some emotions that you are dealing with at the time. So if we can be in the gym less, that's great. If you're in kind of the opposite scenario where you have just less time during the day, but you could go multiple times, you can actually thin it out in terms of more days per week, but then less things per day. So maybe just do 1 or 2 lifts per day instead of more like 4 or 5, right? So that's also a great option. So whichever one allows you to condense training the best to fit it into your schedule at the time. Because usually if we're in a period of high stress, it's also like with the internship or a job project or something else, there's also usually, there's less time on our hands, like less free time. So we need to be cautious of that. And then number 2 is we're going to generally pull back the training intensity so that we can and focus more on sub-maximal lifts. So she did have a top set, but like we go back here, her starting top set was super light, 205 on deadlift after she had smoked 225 for a double. Or no, she had smoked what was that? That was squat. She had just hit 245 for a double, right? So starting off with 205 for a triple, not that bad. She rated it 5.5 anyway. And you'll see the RPEs really never got super high until right here, which triple at 235. Once again, probably a little low for what it should be, assuming recovery was great. But since it wasn't, this ended up panning out to kind of right where we wanted it to be anyway. So pulling back the training stress, not focusing on top sets, keep mostly doing some maximal work to keep us moving. And then also with accessories, understanding that even though hypertrophy and accessories are very important, during this time, it's okay to pull back on those in the sake of mental recovery too, because we also want to be making sure that we aren't, as we're pulling back the training stress, one of the easiest ways to pull back is by pulling back on the accessories. So that way we can still get the main lifts in, because that's the most important part. Like just doing the accessories without the main lift stuff is still going to, or is not going to create the effect. It's better to do the main lift stuff and skip the accessories for a month if that helps us get training in during a period of high stress. So pulling back on some accessories is very useful, right? Made it optional. Sometimes she got it in, sometimes she didn't, and ultimately it didn't necessarily affect her either way when she got in or when she didn't, because we were able to do enough on the main lifts to maintain progress and maintain momentum. So those are the 2 biggest things that we're going to do. Other things that you could do is making sure that, or just being flexible with the training stimulus. So basically, if during the high period of stress, if recovery is kind of super random, which it could definitely be, then it might be better. So like here, we're still using a progressive model, right, of trying to overload. If it's really stressful to the point where like it's up and down and you can't really create progression from week to week, you can always just RPE 5 it or RPE 6 every single slot and just get in the gym and move. That's because like some exercise is better than no exercise, right? Like there's sort of this weird, like, exercise is supposed to be great for stress management, right? But like when they're talking about that type of exercise, it's like going for a walk, going for a run, doing some lifting. And when they're talking about lifting, they're talking about like light dumbbells and machines. They're not talking about heavy barbells and pushing your body to your max. And so in my experience, like if it's too bad, anything that's super heavy or even moderately heavy is going to crush you. And so it's better just to RP6 everything and just kind of make it like a static model and just be like, hey, just show up and feel it out on a day-to-day basis. Understand it's going to be random, but we're just going to keep it like this until you can feel good enough to push again. So that's like another option of if we don't feel like we're in a position to even make progress from a sub-max position, you can just RPE 6 it and just kind of use more of a static model, which I don't like to use that one as much because then it kind of creates a training lull that doesn't feel like it's building momentum. And that the big thing about this is that even though we aren't training with our normal loads or our normal volume, we're still building momentum that allows us to, when the training or when the life stress is done, we're able to kind of pick up where we left off and start the next block. Not rubber meets the road, but in a much better position than if we just had taken it off or not trained at all, or I guess that's the same thing, not trained at all, or like tried to force it and then now you're hurt or you are like overtrained, really beat up, and now we have to take a block to after that to recover, right? We want to make these changes preemptively. And so that is the main things that you want to do, or that I do with my athletes when we are going through a period of high stress. So the block ended up working very, very well for us. We had a strong finish to the block. This period of time, not the rag on Brooke, but this was just kind of a rough like transition back where it wasn't as smooth as we might like it to be. But ultimately, this block so far is going very well. We're getting back into the swing of things. Strength is still there. Like she had just messaged me recently, like in the past day or two. It was her deadlift warm-ups were moving super fast, and she has never moved a 225 as a warm-up that fast, which is kind of in that, high, more like RPE 6-ish, 6 to 7-ish working range. So it's not a weight that normally moves super duper fast for her, right? It's a working weight. So to have her hit that as like a warm-up weight and to be very, very easy is a great sign that we are able to maintain, if not build, a little bit of strength during this period of not being able to train full force. And now that we are in the last block heading into the meet, she's feeling good, training's looking good, numbers are looking good, we're going to be able to put on a great performance. So we were still able to move ourselves forward, move in the right direction, and push the needle forward. So we accomplished the goal that we wanted to. So that concludes my video topic today of how to adapt training during periods of high stress. Hopefully you guys found that useful. Let me know if you guys have any questions. You can drop a question down below. If you're interested in working with me one-on-one as your coach, you can use the link down below to apply for coaching. And if you're interested in grabbing some Good Lift Performance apparel, there's also a link down below to grab some apparel as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can get all of the new videos coming out. I'm going to try to be uploading a video once a week on powerlifting topics again. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of those videos. And until next time, peace.